Welcome to week 7 of the We the People Institute Constitution Reading Plan. You have made it. You are on the last week of our Constitution Reading Plan, and you ought to commend yourselves, because really sit and ask yourself, how many of my friends, my family members, my coworkers have taken the time like I have to sit down and make sure that I understand, not just have read, but understand the United States Constitution. And hey, if you're behind, utilize this time to catch up, because you ought to and you deserve to understand the United States Constitution. So with that being said, let's go ahead and unpack the final amendments 21 through 27 in our great Constitution. So the 21st Amendment, it has to do with the prohibition. Of course, we learned last week that the 18th Amendment is what outlined the prohibition. And again, to remind you, the prohibition was banning the sale of tobacco products and alcohol altogether. So with this religious revivalism happening in America around the early 1900s, alcohol was a big deal, and it was something that a lot of people viewed as immoral. A lot of people called the sense of decadency as like a national curse. There were a lot of family movements that were going on at the time to rally against alcohol. You know, it may seem so foreign to us, but it was something that was in place. Now, some of the bad things that came out of it was there was an underground black market for alcohol, and it was called bootlegging, the illegal sale of it, and it ran rampant. When the Great Depression hit, a lot of people were questioning whether or not this was still a good practice, because it did deny people jobs. A lot of people were questioning whether it denied individual liberty. So in 1933, this amendment, the 18th Amendment, was overturned by the 21st Amendment when it was ratified. So 18th Amendment happened in 1919, and then the 21st Amendment happened in 1933. So there was a substantial portion of period in our history where alcohol was illegal. And I think that that's pretty interesting. So then we get into the 22nd Amendment. The 22nd Amendment is particularly interesting because it was established due to one president, the only president that has ever served as many terms as he did. So most presidents have really only served 1 to 2 terms. Franklin D. Roosevelt served 4 terms. He was the only president, again, to serve beyond 2 terms. So in response to this, some people were wary of what that could lead to. So then this 22nd Amendment was ratified. The 23rd Amendment, it pretty much just allows any American citizens that live in the District of Columbia, because again, it's not a state, to still be able to vote and their vote count towards a presidential election. So then we get into the 24th Amendment. So we are all aware of Civil War Reconstruction period, issues with Jim Crow laws, discrimination, racism, the history in our country. So the 24th Amendment was just another aid in fighting this long battle. So at the time when a lot of this reconstruction started happening, desegregation, there was still a lot of push, a lot of roadblocks that people of color faced. One of these roadblocks were that in order to vote, you had to pay money. Now, this discriminated against not only people that struggled socioeconomically, but also people of color. So that's why the 24th Amendment was passed, and it was just to aid people so that there wouldn't be roadblocks, so that everyone could vote and obtain equal representation. The 25th Amendment pretty much just outlines that if anything happens to the president, then the vice president becomes president. So then we get into the 26th Amendment. The 26th Amendment pretty much establishes that if you are 18 years old, you can vote. Where this comes from, now this was a slogan that was heard during World War II, but student activists during the Vietnam War adopted it, and it says, old enough to fight, old enough to vote. So that's where we get this specific amendment. Then we get to the last amendment, the 27th Amendment, which pretty much just restricts government pay. Congressional pay specifically. This is an amendment that was introduced in Congress in 1789 by James Madison, but it wasn't able to be ratified until 1992. And it was ratified in 1992 because people were frustrated that Congress was passing bills to give themselves raises. So that is why we have that specific amendment. And just to give you a little historical breakdown, the annual salary of a rank and file member of Congress is $174,000. So your congressional representatives, that's how much they get. Congressional leaders can earn more because they have additional responsibilities. So the Speaker of the House receives $223,500 annually, and the Senate President pro tempore receives $193,400. So to wrap things up, the amendments are simply evidence that our Constitution is not perfect. And that is why it is up to us to understand the Constitution, to read it, to hold government officials accountable for it, and to protect it, because amendments can be added and amendments can be taken away, like we've seen throughout history, like we've seen throughout this reading plan. So again, I commend you for taking the time to study, for taking the time to learn, and for taking the time with us as a community to grow in your knowledge, because it is something that most people don't commit to doing. But again, it does not end here. So stay tuned for the next video where we sum it all up for you, the importance of it, what your next steps are, and the importance of activism in America. Thank you again. Great job.